Okay, when you flip this over, I'm going to show you something down here in the fine print. Cover by Hugh Syme. Who is Hugh Syme? He's the guy that was responsible for basically all the great Rush album covers. Hey, if you're a fan of the band Kick-Axe or Judas Priest or maybe just obscure 80s heavy metal, I think you'll enjoy the video that I have for you today. Now, the day I'm recording this is August 13th, 2025. And the reason I'm doing this today is I saw some news story come across today on my news feed that said that Larry Gillstrom, who's the guitarist for Kick-Axe, had passed away. And apparently it happened last Monday on the 4th of August, and I was completely oblivious to it. And I tell you, I've been wanting to make a video about Kick-Axe for months and months just because I was such a big fan, and I just never really found the right opportunity. I actually had found this kind of interesting newspaper article about them from back in 1984, and I've been wanting to share this with you, and it's never come up. And then when I found out he passed away, I thought, okay, I've got to actually finally talk about them. Now, it's pretty interesting. I saw them opening up for Judas Priest. The first time I saw Judas Priest was on the Defenders of the Faith tour. And I remember going to see them and hearing that there was this band called Kick-Axe that was opening up for them. And of course, you hear the name and you go, what? You know, because there was a band that was called Axe, but this name was just kind of, I don't know, kind of strange. And so anyway, I went to see the concert, and for whatever reason, I just absolutely fell in love with them when they opened up for Judas Priest. And one of the things I remember that was pretty cool is the singer named George Criston. First of all, he has this just crazy cool voice. I loved his voice. He had this really interesting stage presence. And as I recall, and correct me if I'm thinking of a different band, but I'm pretty sure this is true, he played the entire concert barefoot, which I just thought was so strange. You know, he's running around the stage in his bare feet. And anyway, but they were awesome. I loved them. So it was probably a day or two after I saw them opening up for Judas Priest that I went and I bought this album, which is called Vices. It was the album that was out at the time. And I didn't really know much about them other than they were really cool in concert, and I bought this record. And I thought the name was a little and the cover was a little silly, but the music was amazingly awesome. I really, really loved it. And they had one song that kind of, I don't know if it got popular, but a lot of people knew about it because it was a little bit of a novelty, and it was called Heavy Metal Shuffle. And it was just this cool, really heavy rockin' tune. But as I listened to this album, and that, of course, that was the first album right there, you'll see it. But then they had this other song called Vices, which was just great. And then you start going through this whole album, and there was just so many great tunes. And one of them that I really fell in love with was this song called Dreaming About You. And it was kind of a slower tune, and it was just, it was great. I loved it. Again, as a teenage boy, whatever I would have been, I was probably 15 at the time when I saw them. This just, for whatever reason, it just spoke to me. And you go through the whole album. On the Road to Rock was a great tune. Cause for Alarm was a great tune. Alive and Kickin', All the Right Moves. The whole thing, I just absolutely loved it. And by the way, this right here is Larry Gillstrom. He's the one that passed away. These two guys, the guitarist and the drummer, they're brothers. And so anyway, I fell in love with them when I saw them for Judas Priest. I went and bought this record, and it was probably, I don't know when it was, maybe a month or two after that, they actually toured through as a headliner at a place called the Rainbow Music Hall in Denver, Colorado, which is kind of a legendary place because of all the people that had played there over the years. Anyway, so Kick-Axe was coming to town to play a concert at the Rainbow Music Hall. This time they were headlining, and I was there. I went and saw them as a headlining group. And again, as I recall, George Criston played the entire thing in his bare feet. Now, I knew, since I was talking about this, I went and I kind of dug through my bag of shirts, hoping that I would be able to find it there. And sure enough, here is my concert shirt from going to see Kick-Axe. And it's one of those shirts, I know a lot of you can probably relate to this, it was black at one point. And then it kind of faded after wearing it 1,000 times, wearing it to school over and over and over again. Anyway, it had the album cover on it, and on the back, all it had was just the Kick-Axe logo. But I really liked, as probably a lot of you did, kind of having these bands that were a little bit unknown. Not a lot of people who knew who they were, so they were kind of your band. And Kick-Axe was one of those groups for me where I just fell in love with them. Now, this album, there's a couple kind of interesting things about it. Now, one of the things you'll see down here is that they were on Pasha Records. Now, why is this important? Pasha, as you recall, was also the label that Quiet Riot put Metal Health on. And that album, of course, ended up being just enormous. Now, the connection then was not only that they were on Pasha, but that you'll see right here, it was produced by Spencer Proffer. And Spencer Proffer also produced Quiet Riot's Metal Health. Where people didn't necessarily know about this album, a lot of people, some friends of mine had said, oh yeah, I heard of them because they had a song on a movie soundtrack called Up the Creek. And on this soundtrack called Up the Creek, they did a song called 30 Days in the Hole. Now, for those of us that had, we were just teenagers and we didn't know all the the history of rock music and all the things, so many of the things that had come before. But 30 Days in the Hole, we knew it was a cover, but we didn't realize that was actually an old Humble Pie song. And so Kick-Axe had done a cover of Humble Pie's 30 Days in the Hole and then put it on that movie soundtrack called Up the Creek. So now that's where a lot of people kind of became familiar with them. Of course, they put this album out, and then, they were on this big label that, or at least with this big producer, and this very successful label had been successful with Quiet Riot. And then they put that, and so this would have been in May of 1984 when this album came out. And they'd put out the Up the Creek soundtrack. Had come out actually a month before this was released, this album Vices. So now I'm totally in, and I love Kick-Axe at this point because I absolutely love this record. Then I found out they were going to be putting out another album, and it was going to be on November 29th of 1985. So it was about about a year and a half later, and they put out this album called Welcome to the Club. And this was a real departure, where that first album, the album Vices, was this really kind of gritty, raw, dirty, and I say dirty, I mean kind of dirty sounding, this kind of raw, gritty, heavy metal sound. This album was considerably more polished. You could tell they'd put an enormous amount of time with the tones, organizing the songs, getting everything just really dialed in. So it was kind of different, and probably for those of us like me that were so into that first album, it caught us off guard a little bit. But I got to tell you something, after listening to it a few times, it is an amazing record. And in some ways, I think this is as good, if not better, than the first one because of all the stuff that happened with this. And you can just tell by looking at it. There was a lot more put into this. And I'm going to come back to something, those of you that are Rush fans, there's a really interesting connection that I'm going to show you in just a second. Anyway, so it was a really cool album cover, and you flip it over, and then here's this, just a great picture of the guys. There again is Larry Gillstrom. He's the one that passed away. And they had this song called Welcome to the Club that was just a great tune. Feels Good, Don't Stop was great. And you just kind of go through the line here, and there was just also just a bunch of great tunes on here. And they stepped it up again, like I said, because the production quality was so superior to what it had been on the other album. Now, this was also produced again by Spencer Proffer, the same guy that had done Quiet Riot's Metal Health, and you can see that they're still on Pasha Records. Now, I'm going to show you the inside while we're at it, and then I'm going to show you something again that you'll find pretty interesting. Of course, on this side here, you just have the lyrics, and then on the other side, they have these, again, kind of pretty cool pictures of the group. Now, here's the really cool connection that you'll find kind of interesting. And once I say it, if you didn't know this, you'll instantly kind of, you'll be able to sense it. You'll be able to tell now when you look at it after I tell you this. Okay, when you flip this over, I'm going to show you something down here in the fine print. Cover by, right there, Hugh Syme. Hugh Syme. Who is Hugh Syme? He's the guy that was responsible for basically all the great Rush album covers. Now, putting this in perspective, just look at that for a second. Does that not look like something that Hugh Syme would have done? First of all, kind of an interesting connection with Permanent Waves is, if you remember on Permanent Waves, he had the Dewey versus Beats Truman newspaper. And if you've seen that album cover, you know that it's kind of sitting there kind of off to the left-hand side on the record cover. And here we have another newspaper. But the thing that really got me about this, when you kind of put this in perspective, this album came out 1 month after Power Windows. And when you look at Power Windows and you look at this, you can just, again, there's something about it. When you point out that this was designed by Hugh Syme, you instantly go, okay, you're right, I can see it. There's just something about the way he would design things, the way he would think things through, and also kind of some of the kind of funny little things that he would do. You know, this is Welcome to the Club, and just silly things like club, like a fan club. And you, of course, have these people with their head as fans, right? And then if you just went through this, you could probably analyze all the interesting things that Hugh Syme would have done. Because, again, if you look at Permanent Waves, that's a great example where you have all of these little plays on words, these little interesting things that he would do. And this is just another example of the kind of thing that you would expect from a Hugh Syme design. Anyway, I thought you'd find that interesting. Now, one of the things I didn't really know, of course, way back in the day, I knew that they had opened up for Judas Priest, but I didn't know why. You know, I didn't know much about them, what the connection was. And when I found this newspaper article, and whether you're into Kick-Axe or not, if you're into Judas Priest, you're going to find this kind of interesting, this newspaper article that I found. And this is from the StarPhoenix, November 1st of 1984. And so this was, what, 6 months or so after this first album, the Vices had come out. And they put this article out, and it tells a little bit about why Kick-Axe, why they're around, why they're opening up for Judas Priest, how they got a record contract, why we even know who they are. And so I want to share this with you. I'm just going to read through this. It's not very long, but again, I think you'll find this interesting. And there, of course, is a picture of the guys. This is Larry Gillstrom, the guy that passed away over here on the left. And then here's the article. Kick-Axe, blessed by Lady Luck. Show business success is usually determined by two factors: plenty of hard work and good old-fashioned luck. Kick-Axe, a heavy metal band comprised mainly of Saskatchewan players, has combined the two and is currently riding a crest of popularity which extends well beyond the provincial borders. After years of scuffling to dates in sleazy gin mills across the country, the five-member outfit was struck by Lady Luck and has spent the better part of this year playing to massive crowds of headbangers at football stadiums and arenas throughout the United States and Canada. How did a relatively little-known bar band achieve that success? A large part had to do with a small club date in Alberta earlier this year. And by the way, they are Canadian, and that kind of explains a little bit about some of the connections, especially with Hugh Syme. Okay, although the group had produced a record late last year and had a song on the Up the Creek soundtrack, it was still relegated to the bar circuit. But the band's fortunes took a change for the better during a show in Calgary. Drummer Brian Gillstrom explains, "We were playing a small bar at the same time Judas Priest was in town. Rob Halford, who's Judas Priest's lead singer, was playing disc jockey on a radio station, and one of our fans called and told him about us. That phone call prompted Halford to check out the band that night, and he came away impressed. At the time, Priest was just beginning an extensive North American tour and, according to Gillstrom, was not happy with its current opening act. One thing led to another, and the next thing Gillstrom recalls, the band was asked to join the Judas Priest tour as opening act. We went from the bars to playing before 20,000 people, Gillstrom said." And I tell you, that is so amazing thinking about this, because when I saw Judas Priest, it was at a place that isn't there anymore, but it was in Denver called McNichols Arena. And I think it held like somewhere in the neighborhood of 18,000 people, you know, when you had all the seats on the floor. It was it was a full-size big place. And thinking about that, moving from, like you said, they were playing bars, and then all of a sudden they're playing these massive arenas supporting Judas Priest is quite a change. Judas Priest is one of the veterans of the heavy metal scene, having started in the early 1970s and gaining in popularity until its shows rivaled the antics in a Roman Colosseum. And while Kick-Axe was opening for Priest, its own record, Vices, was released to unanimous critical praise. Throughout the summer months, Kick-Axe traveled back and forth across the country, playing before screaming mobs of hardcore metal maniacs. At the end of the Judas Priest tour, the band linked up with the Scorpions and opened for the group on its Canadian dates, then drove to California for dates with Quiet Riot. Having a record deal with the small independent label Pasha has also been a bonus for the band, as well as another stroke of luck. The band's manager, Gary Stratichuk, sent a demo tape to Pasha, and label president Spencer Proffer was so impressed he flew to Edmonton to catch the band at a club. Proffer immediately offered the band a contract. And again, there's the connection that we talked about a few minutes ago, where he had been involved with Quiet Riot, and now he's involved with Kick-Axe. Pasha, is just a small organization, but it's amazing, Gillstrom said. Record sales have topped the 50,000 mark in Canada and are close to 100,000 in the United States. After 8 years spent in bars and clubs across Canada, Gillstrom can see the floodlights of major halls in both Canada and the U.S. as the band's playground. Saturday's 7:30 and 10 p.m. shows at the Centennial Auditorium will mark the first time it headlines. We're especially glad to be headlining in Saskatchewan. That's our home. Other than the lead singer, George Criston, who hails from Milwaukee, the band's members, Larry Gillstrom on lead guitar, brother Brian on drums, Ray Harvey on lead guitar, and Victor Langan, are all Saskatchewan born and bred. I didn't know the connection that Rob Halford had kind of discovered them in a way. He was just in a town there, and he was doing that DJ thing. Somebody called in, told him to check out Kick-Axe, and he checks him out, and the next thing you know, they're playing this huge tour, and the next thing you know, I'm at a record store buying Vices, and then not long, a year or so later, I'm buying Welcome to the Club, and I didn't keep track of them after that. This was actually the last thing I ever bought, and there's probably people watching this right now going, "Oh my gosh, what is your problem? You need to buy." I'd love to know the other things that I should have purchased. I kind of fell off the Kick-Axe bandwagon after this one, but I again, if you've never listened to either of these albums, in my opinion, it is really worth your time, especially if you love 80s metal, 80s production. There's something about this that was so cool. And George Criston, as a singer, he was really excellent on stage, but he had this just incredibly unique voice. There's nobody that sounds like him. Go listen to him, and I don't know who you'd even compare him to. Just had this very interesting sounding voice, and it fit this music so well. It was just great stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I'd love to get your feedback. Do you remember this band? Did you see them in concert? And did you own any of their albums, especially these two? And if so, what did you think of them? And of course, follow the channel if you're not already following the channel. Love to get your feedback, like the video, and also share this video with other people. We really appreciate when you do that. That kind of stuff makes a huge difference for channels like this. It really helps them grow. So we really appreciate that. We see so many times when we even got so lucky as Jack Osborne, Ozzy's son, shared the video that we put out last Monday on his Twitter page, or X, on his X feed, and also on Facebook. And of course, just tens of thousands of views just come from sharing things like that. And I don't expect that to happen with everybody, but still, those are the kind of things, when you share this with other people, that really does make a difference for channels like this. And we really appreciate when you do. So anyway, with that, have yourself a fantastic day.